Good evening, Graham.
Hello, Charles. You all right?
In fine indeed, slightly rushed coming over from Markington to York, but here now on a beautiful, beautiful day, of course. And lovely to have a chat. This is Charles Hutchinson, co-host of Two Big Egos in a Small Car, maybe for Easter week, two big eggs in a small car, but that'll be next week's joke. So, Graham, welcome.
Cracking.
Cracking, welcome, Graham Chalmers, co-host. Introduce yourself, Graham, as usual.
Oh, Harrogate advertiser, long time. Bradford Health Argus, Hull Daily Mail, Charm Magazine, Charm Gigs, Charm Talks, Charm Events, BBC6 Music Star.
Absolutely. I'm Charles Hutchinson, journalist of mainly of the York parish, but also delighted always to cover anywhere else in Yorkshire, of course. Also contribute to a York radio station on a fortnightly basis. Still write for the York Press regularly, and delighted above all else to be podcasting co-host with Graham. Now, Graham, tonight's first subject. This is one
Quick
maybe that we.
interruption, Charles. Quick
Oh,
interruption.
quick. Oh, shock.
I've got an alert for all music fans.
Yeah.
Just be careful because there's a new Ed Sheeran single out.
What's this one called? Plus, minus,
Well, well, all the media saying he's got all
division?
Persian and Middle East. It's called Azizam, and Azizam is from the Farsi language.
Mm.
That's about the only Middle Eastern part of the song that's actually called Azizam. Apart from that, it's your usual mild dance, pop, clean, smooth, vague, upbeat, bit bland.
Well, that's great news. Look forward to the album, which we haven't yet established whether this one will be called Subtraction, Division, Algorithm, Logarithm.
But by the way, guess which is the biggest growing market for music in the world right now?
Biggest market.
The biggest market for making money out of music worldwide, right? The growing market is the Middle East, which sort of ties in quite nicely with the use of the Farsi language.
So you're suggesting a certain cynicism that's never been associated with Ed
No,
Sheeran
no,
even
no, 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 no,
once.
no. We know that Ed's a man of inspiration, innovation, and a man to do things on the spur of the moment regularly.
Right. Okay. I look forward to that happening for the first time. So, Graham, let's go from Dear Ed, who sums up the mediocrity of so much of British music right now, to looking at struggling small venues, rising ticket prices, which is actually truly alarming now what's going on with that, and My Bloody Valentine, who, of course, are going to be playing their first gigs for quite some time, and I imagine with an astronomical ticket price to go with it. So, Graham, are these things in some ways all interrelated?
Well, yeah, it also links into Sunderland, which is now a music city. So it's all linked. But you and me saw My Bloody Valentine at their absolute peak in about 1991
Yeah,
on the roller coaster tour at Sheffield,
mm,
where
indeed.
for about the price of £10, we saw My Bloody Valentine at the peak, the
Yep,
loudest gig I've ever been at,
yep,
and Jesus and Mary Chain,
yep,
Dinosaur Jr.,
yep.
and Blur for a
And Blur.
tenner.
Blur
Anyway, so
opened
the
that gig. Blur opened that gig.
I know they weren't the biggest band by any means whatsoever at that point.
Exactly.
But the
So
thing is,
happy
now that
days
My
then,
Bloody
Graham.
Valentine, yeah,
Hmm.
My Bloody Valentine's tour, as you mentioned, is coming up in November,
Yes.
and they're coming to Aviva Studios in Manchester, which
Yeah,
only opened last year. I
that's
went to
right.
the opening, and they're coming on Monday, November the 24th, and the general admission ticket price for My Bloody Valentine is £60.50.
So now I'm trying to work out if that feels like not bad value, typical price now you might be paying for an arena gig, or do you feel it's a rip-off, or do you feel, well, no, it's typical?
Well, Aviva Studios isn't an arena;
Nope.
it's somewhere in between O2 Academy and an arena.
Hmm.
So it seems slightly expensive, except when you consider that to see Fellow John Misty at Leeds O2 Academy is more than 40, £50.
Yes, which
You're
you were
right, by
drawing attention to
by
last week.
the
Mm.
standards of ticket
Mm.
prices now, it doesn't seem ridiculous, but it's still a lot for My Bloody Valentine, who, let me remind listeners, have never really had a single hit at any point, even though they're a classic band. But the interesting thing about the general admission price is that when you go online to buy a ticket,
Mm.
it asks you if you want to make a voluntary £1 donation to the Live Trust, which is interesting.
This is to save
And
small
that's a
venues.
new, yeah, it's a new funding initiative to
Mm.
offer financial support to those working across live venues in live music. So it's not just small venues, it's about people who probably really suffered during COVID when they couldn't, when gigs had stopped, and roadies and sound engineers and things like that, as well as venues. And the reason this has happened, well, I learned this because I noticed a tweet from Sunderland's Labour MP Lewis Atkinson about the fact he was proud that Sunderland was now a music city, and he was talking in Parliament about it. And he mentioned like grassroots venues in Sunderland, like Pop Rex, where I
Mm,
saw field music a
mm,
couple of years ago. He also said the government is going to implement a voluntary arena stadium gig levy to provide grassroots support for music. So that must be it. It must already have started, which is when you go online to buy a ticket at an arena or stadium gig, ask you if you want to do £1 donation,
yeah.
which
I
might
mean,
actually help.
I think it's a good idea, but I would have been far happier instead if the sum that you have to pay for this pointless thing of a booking fee that never used to exist, if that money went to support the world of the small venue and the world of bands starting out who need somewhere to play, instead of all these additional charges that now go to the simple act of trying to book a ticket.
Well, yeah, you're right. And top of that, it's not that music venues, small indie music venues, aren't successful or can't pull crowds to do. It's the rising cost base of doing
Yeah,
so, which
yeah,
is nothing to do with them. And it's
mm,
also linked to the fact that so many bands who are even vaguely successful are now hoovered up by American-owned companies that own the bigger venues,
mm,
that promote the bigger venues, that control the merchandise in bigger venues. And so it's getting more expensive for the smaller venues to actually book acts, which previously would
mm,
have been cost a ridiculous amount of money.
mm,
It also means that small indie venues, which are successful, it's just a matter of the cost. It means they're now being treated like a little bit like a lame duck craft industry, which needs protecting. It's like they're become part of the Kinks. We are the Village Green Preservation Society,
mm.
and where it requires to be cherished and supported like something old fashioned from 200 years ago, and which seems a bit wrong. They should be able to survive by being busy, which clearly isn't the case.
I mean, we are still seeing new venues open, Graham. That still is happening.
Yeah, but they're all struggling and they're all pulling different strokes to stay afloat. So they're
Mm,
not just doing like, they're all thinking outside the box, to use that terrible expression, all blue sky thinking. So it's a bit like farmers who are diversifying
yeah,
into like tourism. They
yeah.
can't make enough money just by being a standard farm. So they have to think of other ways of making money. And small and independent live venues are becoming a bit like that. They're thinking around the problem, which is great. I admire that, and if it works, fantastic. But it tells you something's wrong when they have to do that.
In what way are they now, to quote you, thinking outside the box, Graham? What sort of promotions are
I
they doing
remember
for
hearing on
that?
BBC Six Music about during Live Menu Week, which is a brilliant event on BBC
Yes.
Six Music,
Mm,
and they interviewed a lot of people who own these venues across Britain, and I'm
mm,
sure it was one in Bristol or somewhere. And they were saying when they're not doing gigs, they're doing this and that. They're not just using it for live bands on tour. They're doing other community work. They're opening out to other people. They're doing anything they can possibly do to make extra money, and they're also cutting their costs by not opening certain times. And they're looking at their expenditure and their costs, with a
would that
fine
mean
tooth
what
comb the whole
do
time.
opening for fewer nights a week for gigs? Even is that one of the possible
A
things?
bit, yeah, a bit like that. But they also have like, they'll
Mm,
have like training courses for musicians and things like
yeah.
that, which again is good. It's like these aren't
That
bad things in themselves. These are all
no,
good things.
no.
But they're only really doing it because just they got no choice because the cost base for running a smallish venue is changed horrendously
Well,
over the
I mean,
last 2 or 3 years.
I think the idea of actually maybe using venues during the day as well as in the evening is a good idea. I come from a family that has run Rip and Racecourse for several generations, and some to the outsider they'll say, well, all you have is a few race meetings per year. What do you do with the rest of the time? And it's not an unreasonable question to ask. So, racecourses have to look to diversify. Weatherby Racecourse has done plenty of that. Yes, Ripon Racecourse will have things like car boot sales there. It'll have the Darlington Dog Show there, etc. So you have to find ways to use more than in the case of rock venues, just doing your gigs of an evening. I think that's a sensible I think that's a sensible policy to do anyway.
Yeah, well, no
Absolutely.
one's arguing that necessity isn't the mother of invention.
Mm,
That's always applied.
mm,
But what comes next, once they've done all these diversifications and tightened their belt, etc., etc.,
mm.
if there's any more shocks to the system in live music, they're sort of running out of options after that, if you know what I mean.
I think like farmers keep finding ways to diversify under pressure. I think live
I don't
music
know.
venues, I'm pretty convinced that live music venues, look, as long as young people want to play music, want to be in a band, want to perform, I think there'll be venues for them. I just don't see that dying out. There's
I
traditional
mm,
guitar bands, maybe fewer of that, but you're still finding musicians that want to perform, and so I can't see that changing. I don't think that suddenly people will only record music and never perform. I mean, the different experience of seeing a concert as opposed to listening to a record, it's to me, it's rather, well, okay. The example would be to listen to a record of a comedian from a show as opposed to being there. You need to be there. I'm not saying there's not value in listening to an album. Of course there is, but the experience, contact, being in a crowd, these things I think people still value. I do, and I don't see that changing.
yeah, well, I'm not arguing with that, Charles, but you missed the point that it's the economic model, it's the business model of running a smallish or independent live venue that's
Yeah.
changed. And at some point, all the things that are going against live music need to stop. Otherwise, there will be a threat. And on top of that, I foresee that in a year's time, that the small independent venues will be charging more for tickets as well, because they'll have no options. So I think there'll be a general price inflation from the bottom to the top when
So
it comes to
yet
live
yet
music.
more yet more inflationary pressures.
Exactly, yeah. And also for if you diversify to stay afloat. I mean, would you be happy if Buckingham Palace
Hmm.
to keep going because the king's finances were a bit bad was like a sandwich factory 2/3 of the week, and it was a royal residence 1/3 of the week. I realize this is a bit of a tangent.
I feel that's very tangential, and I don't think you've used a good example there. Um, but no, I don't have. Look, I would only have a problem with it if a gig couldn't take place because I don't know, a yoga session took precedence of an evening at a venue. But
Now, there's a great name for an indie band, Yoga Session.
yoga session. Well, so I am more concerned and alarmed at what I do think is highly likely, as you say. You can see the trend yet again with everything is upwards in prices, and that will make more difficulties for venues, and therefore, in turn, for those who go to concerts, because you then start choosing, or which one I'll go to. You may no longer go to two a week; you might just go to one a week or one a month instead, or whatever. Um, Interestingly, though, Graham, I think York Barbican looks to have had this year its busiest diary that I can ever recall. Seems to me
Mm.
there are more things going on there than ever. And
Didn't you see a certain band at the Barbican recently in York?
I did.
Who is that?
I went to see public service broadcasting, Graham,
Ah,
and Full House. They had played previously in York. They played at Fibbers, I think maybe three times. The last time was 2013. Hadn't played in York since 2013. They'd once
ah,
played at a goth festival, DV8 Goth Festival.
Goth Festival.
That's no, that was your reaction. It was also Jay Wildgoose Esquire's reaction. I think he said when I interviewed him, he said, "I think they might have mistaken what we
If there's
were."
anybody less goth than J. Wilgus Esquire, I
Yeah.
can't think of anybody less goth than him.
So I last saw them at Leeds Polytechnic, and they. So now I think it's what, five albums plus that album, the live concert album that they did with the orchestral album. And I think
Mm,
now they've got to a stage of their shows absolutely complete.
mm,
I think they're pretty well at a perfect stage for them now because you have even a brass section playing with them.
yeah.
So as a Yorkshireman who loves brass band music, to have three brass band players there being like a mariachi band on certain songs, and on top of that,
Mm,
they had a singer who's a Scandinavian singer.
mm,
I think her name's Era, if I remember it correctly. So she would do. live vocals within the show as well, and you all already have the elements that we know that work so wonderfully well. The combination of the live visual work that is done by one of the band members, who effectively he's on his keyboard at the back doing that, and then going and filming live, comes out, steps in front, films the band members. So it all feeds into both the film stock that's already there, plus the live footage. And so every time Mr. B, I think his name is, it's done live. You then have the sublime guitar playing of Jay Wildgoose. I mean, phenomenal guitar playing.
Is it Will Goose or Wild Goose,
I'm
Charles?
I'm going wild, but I could be wrong.
I think Will.
Well, you could always look it up. You say wild, I say will. You say tomato, I say tomato. Anyway, I'm wild about Wild Goose, and I'm not
Mm.
talking like Jimi Hendrix pyrotechnics on the
Oh
guitar.
no, there's nothing Hendrix about public service broadcasting.
No, but it is still the way that he plays that instrument and how he uses. I mean, some elements, I guess, would perhaps remind people of dream pop or maybe of shoegazing. Maybe there's an element of that. But I love the fact that actually a song he takes it's he's using a guitar in a melodic way within songs. Then you add, of course, the recorded imagery and recorded voices, and then on top of that, now the live singing. So all the elements come together to make, I think, a complete concert for the 21st century age. I think it's got all the elements that you would want within it. There's even a dance music, or you can dance to some of the songs now. This because
Yeah.
they went off to do an album about Berlin, and inevitably that included the nightlife of Berlin. So you had to have songs that reflected that. The latest album, of course, The Last Flight, about Amelia Earhart's tragic last flight, beautifully put together again. And here you have the live singing element that comes in. And it's again going back to that thing of human aspiration, human dream. And I think their songs do the same in themselves.
Yeah, but
They're not obvious ways of presenting music live. They've found a way, I think, to be novel and innovative in what they do.
yeah, but
They
essentially
capture
with
the
their storylines from real life and their
yeah,
sampled narration from real
yeah,
life and bits of audio and bits of dialogue, public service broadcasts are essentially they're very cinematic. They're essentially
yes,
making soundtracks for films that never were.
yeah. You're
Every
right,
album
and
is like a different soundtrack.
yes, I mean, and of course, to have the mining industry as one of those. The first album, I guess, was looking at human endeavors. Well, the second album had space, so that human endeavor. The first album, climbing, for example, climbing Everest. So it's always looking at what
And
we can achieve.
Spitfire in the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, and heroism within that, bravery. I think it's looking at the best of humanity and trying to break down barriers and achieve things. And again, against the context of what the bloody hell's going on in this world right now, that is so depressing, where the only experimentation is for vastly wealthy billionaires to send themselves up into space, rather than actually trying to improve things for mankind, which would be a far more beneficial way to spend their ridiculous amounts of money that they have. So you have a band here who I think are reminding us of what we should be aspiring to. So it's another reason to really admire them. That maybe it's rooted in past achievement or past ambition, but it's giving a message to us: go out, have a go at doing that. We can still
Yeah.
achieve as mankind. We don't need bloody tariffs destroying the world. Let's go and
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
do something positive.
I, I agree, but I'd also say that I've seen them live three times at different parts of the career,
Mm,
and I do like them. I've got most of their albums, and I do like them. But there's something very, 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 very British stroke
good,
English middle
good.
class Guardian reader. They even when they're dealing with politics, it's always in the very best of taste. They're not they're not really
It's not
they're
Sleaford
in no way
Mods. I
a
take that. It's not
confrontational
Sleaford
band.
Mods. I get that. Actually, Graham, I don't
Mm,
have a problem with what you're saying. I think it's a
mm.
fair point, but I don't think it makes them anodyne at all. What's the biggest
It
chunk of
doesn't, but
human people in
yeah,
Britain now? It's the middle class. So if they're addressing the middle class, I don't think they're ignoring others in doing that. But it's a huge, great chunk of the British society is middle class. I love the fact that they're very English. I like the fact they dress in corduroy. I like the fact that he even makes a joke of having the recording going, "Thank you very, very, very much, York." or
Yeah,
wherever he's playing.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love all the humor of that. It's playing to British characteristics. I want to champion those things. I am sick and tired of this country being belittled, Graham. And our artistic
Oh yeah,
endeavors are still some of the best in the world. So don't get negative about what they're doing. I think it's harsh and unfair.
I do like a good pair of corduroy trousers myself. Not thick corduroy, the thinner corduroy. But I just think as much as I like them, they're almost like they're like people. They're like William Morris who wanted to bring back craft techniques in the medieval age
William
at
Morris
the
was a
height of
champion of
the
the
Industrial
working class.
Revolution.
Despite what you're saying, Graham, his idea
Hmm.
was that everybody should have been entitled to having a really nice
Yeah, yeah,
house.
yeah,
Anything wrong
yeah,
with
yeah.
that?
I'm not. Yeah, yeah. I'm not knocking their general approach or their ideas or where they stand in society and politics and music right now, but they are very they're like Blue Peter. You know, they're good for you. There's something very sort of wholesome about
Good.
public service
Do you know,
broadcasting.
they make me feel better, Graham. I think I'm sick and
Mm.
tired of feeling crap. Thank you, Leeds United.
Uh,
So, I want people that are aspiring to things being better. I'm sick and tired of being reminded of what's wrong. And
mm.
okay, so it might be nice middle class guardianship. I get all that, but actually, I found it a really rewarding gig. Maybe because it's affirming me, middle class,
Yeah, well,
nice,
I'm
safe
just being I'm
Charles.
being devil's advocate here. I mean, you know, I'm sure the Sex Pistols, if they were young now, would having seen public service broadcasting, would be they'd be horrified. But I do like public
I am
service
not sure they
broadcasting, so I
would,
have to say
Graham.
that.
I'm not sure that you
Mm,
can compare them with
mm.
prog rockers going on about kings from the past. I'm not. I don't think so. I actually think they are looking at the best of what we can achieve, the best of what we have achieved in the past, and why can't we still have those kind of aspirations? Now, punk
I
was a
think you're right.
reaction.
So
Punk was a
I
reaction to
yeah,
what? Self-indulgence. I
I
don't think you
agree.
can say
So
public service broadcasting as self-indulgent. Absolutely not.
let's call this a score draw, Charles.
Okay, Graham. Well, I didn't realize this debate would go the way that it did. I think it was interesting. So, on behalf of broadcasting a podcast, I'm saying, Graham, that I would like you to go and see public service broadcasting again. But I suspect you may feel that you've just maybe had enough of them and there's nothing new they can do.
No, I'd like a new album to like surprise me and be a bit
Okay, that's fair
strident.
enough. Now, Graham, I realise we've probably spent more time than I intended. So let's have a look, if we may. We may hold one topic till next week. Let's go with the death of who you call the underrated Val Kilmer and why he's the best thing in Michael Mann's film Heat, playing opposite Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, who, of course, famously took rather too long to warm up in that film and create any sense of heat. And I think you're probably right in your suggestion there. I think, as ever, it's taken a death to make people appreciate Val Kilmer in the way that he should have been.
Yeah, well, he was in a lot of films, mainly big Hollywood films,
Mm,
and he always brought. The strange thing about Val Kilmer was that he's exceedingly good looking, almost good looking like a female actress of the Hollywood past would be good looking,
mm.
and yet he always brought depth to any role he played. You know, whether it was even Top Gun or Tombstone or Heat, and although he was never because he looked so good, usually with blonde hair looked like I had blue eyes. Maybe they weren't, but he came across like a blue-eyed boy. Because of that, it was almost like the old cliche from years ago about a dumb blonde in a movie. Like you can't take them
Mm,
seriously as an actress because they're
mm.
just a dumb blonde. But like the way Marilyn Monroe wasn't respected all those years ago
Yes.
in her films, and he's like that. He looks like he shouldn't be that good, but he is. He brought more depth than people assumed by the way he looked
What did
to
he bring to
every
Jim
single role he
Morrison, do
did.
you think? What did he bring to Jim Morrison in the doors?
Well, he acted just like Jim Morrison. I mean,
Mm,
Jim Morrison was a caricature before the Doors film because his reputation in the 1960s before he died in Paris
yeah,
in 71, I think it was.
yeah.
And he made him a real three-dimensional person
Mm,
and caught all his attributes, all
mm,
his character, and most importantly, all his charisma. Because
mm.
when you're dealing with someone famous in a rock music biopic, if you don't get the charisma of that person, it's immediately not very convincing because, you know, major rock stars tend to have lots of charisma, and Val Kilmer captured Morrison's natural charisma brilliantly.
I think it's the rock portrait that's been typically with Val Kilmer has been underrated and not wouldn't say forgotten, but I think it's been underappreciated how his performance in that film was. And I think that may be a typical story with him. I mean, he was, of course, the leading man in that, but quite often he didn't play leading man. He played second or third lead, and maybe that was part of maybe a frustration that he's underrated, because actually, in terms even of he didn't often lead films in the way that maybe his talent warranted.
Well, yeah, in Heat, the stars are obviously Al Pacino and Rob De Niro. Now,
Mm.
Pacino and De Niro are clearly two of the greatest film actors of all time.
Yeah.
And watch them together in Michael Mann's Heat, the crime drama set in LA from 1995,
Mm.
is an absolute treat. But I watched it again recently, and I noticed that although Pacino and De Niro are completely watchable the whole time and are absolutely brilliant, compared to Val Kilmer, they're both actually overacting. they're both a little bit on
Graham,
the
perish
edge
the
of like
thought. Was
being
Heat the
too.
film that set them on their trend to overact more often than they don't these days?
Possibly, but I think they already started going that way in the 90s anyway. And when you watch Val Kilmer, which is a much smaller role
Yeah.
in the same film, what he does with his performance is that on the surface he's like a smiling, happy-go-lucky, cool, good-looking bank robbing dude,
Mm.
and he's not doing that much. But behind his perfect face, there's a whole depth of a backstory that comes across purely by his acting. It's never articulated in the dialogue or in the script, but behind that mask of beauty, there's a whole world behind that mask of beauty, which
Mm.
Pacino and De Niro. That's two Pacinos, one De Niro. That's a great cast. Anyway, those two, there's nothing behind what they're saying because they're pushing the performance at the whole time. They're not holding themselves in really, although they're pretending to. They're pretending to be cool, but they're actually overacting. Whereas Kilmer is totally within his role the whole time, and he's the best thing in the film.
Of course, famously in the film, it took forever for Pacino and De Niro to have a scene together, didn't it? That was the kind of,
Mm.
from memory, that was the crux of it. So, how, in terms of what Val Kilmer did, how did he interact with those two leads in the film? Remind me.
Well, I don't think Kilmer was on screen at the same time as Pacino at any point.
Right.
Not face to face, but he is on the screen with De Niro quite a lot of time face to face,
Mm.
and he more than holds his own.
Yeah,
I remember reading about the fact that he was actually nervous because obviously he respected De Niro,
of
and
course.
De Niro is more famous than Kilmer, so he was quite nervous on the set. But being Val Kilmer, you never know that from his performance.
Mm. And remind me of his involvement in Batman.
Oh, I'd rather not. I'm not a huge Batman fan. Any of the films in the franchise, but the only ones
Mm.
I like are I think the first Christopher Nolan one, Batman Begins, is a
Mm.
really good film. Apart from that, I struggle with any superhero movie, so I couldn't possibly comment. But the thing about Batman films is that the main character's behind the mask, so so you got like, how can you possibly act properly when you can't see your face? It's a bit of a tricky one.
And yet there's been Batman after Batman after Batman film made for all that
But I
problem.
noticed when I watched Heat that I think that Heat is not as good as Get Carter, the British film from '71 starring Michael Caine.
I think
Another
you're
crime
absolutely right,
drama,
Graham.
one set
Mm.
in gleaming LA, one set in gritty Newcastle. But
Newcastle,
Get
yeah.
Carter is actually a better film because
Yeah.
Heat at the end of the day is a Western. It's just
Yes.
basically, although you have a lot of strong female characters who are always disparaging their men folk for being so obsessed with their own egos and their own professions, at the end of the day, the film's just about men doing what a man has to do. You know,
Mm.
you could have starred John Wayne if it made 30 years earlier. Whereas Get Carter is like Samuel Beckett play. It's like
Yeah.
existential.
Yeah.
It's properly deep. It's properly believable. It's not two dimensional. So I think Heat's a great film to watch and enjoy. But Get Carter from '71 is a better film.
Arguably Michael Caine's best performance.
Well, he did a lot of good performances, so
Very good in
it's
Alfie
pretty
as
hard to
well, of
judge.
course. Mm. Mm.
But he is superb in it. Every single
Mm.
scene, he just eats up the screen. He's absolutely phenomenal.
Mm. So Graham, I don't know how many minutes we've got left, but maybe have we got 10?
Easily, yeah.
Good. Well, our other big topic. This is something that's been catching the headlines. There's this new band called the Beatles. I don't know whether you've ever heard of them. But
Yeah.
so the Beatles' road manager and the hidden aspects of the story unlikely to come out in Sam Mendes' forthcoming films of the band. Now, just to remind everybody, Sam Mendes is making a not just one film, it's actually four films. It's a film about each film is a different Beatle. And I guess the headline story so far has been Paul Mescal will play.
I'm guessing it's Paul McCartney.
Correct.
He doesn't look anything
Barry,
like Paul
Barry,
McCartney, but yeah.
Barry, Barry, whatever his name is, Keegan, Barry, him.
Keegan's
Anyway,
playing Ringo.
he he is playing Ringo. The two others,
That could work.
um,
That could work.
good work. The two others, it's no point even asking because they're not names that are familiar. And interestingly, not one of the actors comes from Liverpool. So anyway, that's the background to this. So four films, and obviously, therefore, you'd think, well, surely it's going to be revealing lots and lots of new details. Because otherwise, why is this happening? But you're challenging the fact that you still think hidden aspects of the story, brackets ones that you know presumably, are unlikely to come out. Or do you think
Well,
there'll be
Sam
certain
Mendes is
elements of
obviously
not being allowed to come out still?
well, yeah, it would puncture the Beatles story, which, A, they want to sell the film, and B,
Mm,
Beatles fans love the Beatles story. But yeah, I'm sure Sam Mendes is going to do a good job. And I think he'll, as a man of some pedigree, both
mm,
in theatre and in cinema, it's going to be, a serious, respectable four-film look at the Beatles. I'm assuming that he's going to try and look at it from different angles from each character and somehow cross-reference the four different Beatles viewpoints on some of the same things that happened. He's not Christopher Nolan. He's not that tricksy, but he's a heavyweight director. So
yeah.
I'm sure it'll be an interesting approach. But I've been recently been reading Kenneth Womack's Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans, who was the
Mm.
Beatles road manager,
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm,
fixer, companion, friend, and for a time a music producer and songwriter.
yeah.
He met them in the pre-fame days in Liverpool, so he was there for the whole journey. And that book is quite shocking because there's things in that book that I don't think they'll end up in Sam Mendes' films because it just undermines the Beatles.
In what way does it undermine the Beatles?
Well, first, you've got in the book, and remember, it's from an early version of his own autobiography that Mal Evans wrote before he was killed by the LA police in about 1974.
Mm,
So you've got his bias involved, but he claims to have had input into Paul McCartney songs during Sergeant Pepper that
yeah,
Paul said he was going to give him credit for, then never did. He certainly would help discover Badfinger, who were successful on the
yeah.
Apple label. And he was their music producer for a bit, and he did co-write a Ringo Starr track on the Ringo 1973 album, which was a massive worldwide hit. But apart from that, he got no credit whatsoever from the Beatles. And then on top of that, the book also goes into like some detail about the Beatles' American tours of 64 and 65. And
Mm,
John Lennon did allude in passing in his interview with Jan Wenner of the Rolling Stone magazine in 1970 that the Beatles on tour in the 60s was like a scene from Fellini's Satyricon film, like Roman orgies type things.
mm, mm.
But the Beatles and dubious sex on tours never really,
No, no,
made the limelight for obvious
it's not,
reasons.
is
But
it?
this book
No.
by Kenneth Womack, Living the Beatles Legend Untold Sir Mel Evans, it actually names people in hotel rooms, young women in hotel rooms. It names them by name. It names the hotel. It names the city. It has the dates. So it's really hard to argue with that sort of evidence. And I can't see how that stuff's ever going to make Sam Mendes' film or even any other Beatles books while the Beatles are still alive.
The implications behind that, I mean, is it beholden on a director to broaden the story now that new information is available, if you like? I mean, you're talking about the most sanctified and sacred of all bands, aren't you? Despite the fact that constantly we have new versions of albums coming out with different, earlier versions of tracks, etc., and or scraping the barrel doing that. We have constant documentaries being made, be it Scorsese. So it seems to me there's always new information emerging, but I guess it's from existing stock. And you're suggesting maybe that this is actually coming into clear water for a different source of information that is changing the story. And I
But
wondered, is it important to change the story, or actually would people prefer it not to happen? And I suspect it's the latter, Graham.
it is the latter, and I don't think this sort of stuff will get headlines until the sad day when Paul and Ringo go, or maybe
Mm,
when Olivia Harrison, George's widow, or
mm,
Yoko Ono go as well. I
mm.
can't see that becoming a major thing till the whole thing's gone. So and also you got to remember that with music biopics, when did music biopics ever stick to the facts? They tend to be like a hackneyed version of
Yeah.
the real life story anyway. They don't really
Mm.
go into anything too dark because they want to be a hit. So even though Sam Mendes is a heavyweight director, I can't see why he'd dig up anything new that was negative about the
It's
Beatles.
more likely,
It wouldn't
Graham,
serve.
I would have thought, to
Yeah,
look at the creative tensions that are there. So Harrison's
yeah.
frustration, eventually having to make All Things Must Pass because they just weren't using his songs. It's more likely to be, the clash of what's perceived as sometimes clashes between McCartney and Lennon as to where the band should go. That's more likely to be what will be looked at. Those are given over to dialogue. The assumed differences of opinion, creative differences, that would be the term, wouldn't it? So it's more likely, it seems to me, to look at that, and also to look at what's it called at now, where you have that, you look at the how a person's story comes into being. So the background, how they, where they were born, how that led, how they got into music, etc. It's more likely to look at that path, I think, than it is to focus in on something that may not have been told about any sexual peccadillos or whatever on a tour in
Mm.
America.
Well, the Sam Mendes four films, the series is not due to be screened, the first film that is of the series,
Mm.
until 2028,
Yeah,
which is still quite a distance away.
it is.
So I'm guessing right now, and I'm only guessing, I could be wrong. I'm guessing Sam Mendes himself doesn't know because he probably hasn't done
I'm
the.
assuming also that he's having to get things past McCartney and past Starr and
Well,
past
this has the
Olivia
full permission of
and
the
past
Beatles
Yoko.
estate.
Mm,
But yeah, exactly, because that's another reason why you won't get anything new and negative turning up because this film has been made with the full permission and
mm,
support and help of the surviving Beatles and the Beatles estate. So there's no way there's going to be anything too negative, I don't think.
no.
But I'd be
No.
surprised if Sam Mendes himself has actually got all the finished scripts ready. It sounds like
Mm.
a big task he's got ahead of himself.
There'll still be the Fab Four.
Well, yeah, you're not going to sell tickets if you puncture the Fab Four.
Yeah, you don't want a prefab four.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic Sub production.